Biotopia podcast for all living creatures and earth dwellers.
Biotopia meets scientists, artists and thinkers to experience different ways of thinking about other forms of life, consciousness and death. Today meet two tricksters, Estonian poet and philosopher Hasso Krull and Yoruba poet and philosopher Bayo Akomolafe. They talk about colonization, balance and imbalance, infection, cracks and tricksters.
Tervist, Bayo.
How are you, brother?
So we were already talking a little bit outside here in the garden, and now first I would like to offer the possibility for you, Bayo, to speak a little bit about what have you been engaged in recently, and also a little bit about the background.
Well, I come from Nigeria, as you probably already know now, the west of Nigeria, among the Yoruba people. And my work has been this exploration of, or my path, if you will, has been this exploration of openings and the pathology of closures. So it seems that my philosophy and the things that I like to dabble in are about how do we stay with the trouble of openings? How do we stay with the generativity of cracks and breakings and ruptures? I guess that has brought me to this beautiful country as well.
Yes, and how did you get onto that path?
Yes.
How did you discover this idea, or this? How was it the beginning of this path for you?
The Yoruba people are a very, very earthy, grounded people. Their cosmologies are interwoven with stories of tricksters and lands and undulating places. One of the most fascinating stories that I often tell is the story of the trickster leaving with the slaves during the transatlantic slave trade period.
I see.
The trickster didn't just stay there. The
Yeah.
trickster traveled with.
They
Yeah.
traveled together with them.
It traveled together with them. Instead of stopping the whole thing, the trickster decided to travel with the slaves. And that kind of, you see, I started out with, my education was around, well, I self-educated myself into matters of coloniality.
Yes.
And how, in the words of Walter Rodney, how Europe underdeveloped Africa, right?
Yeah.
But then I found that the way that I wanted to respond to this flattening wasn't
Yeah.
available within the flattening.
I see. Yeah. So, if you have been dealing with those subjects, how do you relate to this movement of Afrocentricity,
Yes.
like Maleficate Sante, for
Maleficate.
example?
Yes. My first, I met Professor Asante in Malaysia, Penang,
Yeah.
first time, and we decided to write together. And that's how.
I see.
Yes.
You know him.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great man.
Yes, indeed. We wrote a book called The Lions of Africa Speak. We shall tell our own stories.
I see. Yeah.
I was very young then, but I reached out to him. I had just given a talk. He just gave a talk as well at a conference on schooling. It was a conference on different epistemologies, different ways of knowing the world. And we found a spiritual connection. And
Yeah.
he's usually referred to as the father of Afrocentrism.
Yeah.
So, that paradigm gave me the language with which to frame my my protest against the flattening of colonialism and imperialism, and to seek out different ways of addressing this crisis, because colonization isn't just infrastructural, it's
Yes.
experiential.
Yes.
It shapes how we think and how we tell stories and how we meet people and how we dream. So, yeah.
Yeah, but colonization has been justified with the idea of development,
Yes.
because the colonial power always said that we came here to help you and to bring you development, and of course this the word development, it
Yes.
came in the middle of the 20th century, but before that they were just bringing culture or something else, and they were always there for good, although it brought with it so many bad things, but that was not their original intention.
Well, colonization is the interruption of a different rationality. You could think it's a logic imposing itself on a different logic. It's interruptive. It's disruptive. It comes with a world and a worlding of its own. It's a ritual. It's a place-making project. What it leaves, it always leaves something out. Maybe I should put it that way. Something is left out. A highway might get me closer to you, but when you flatten a mountain, you've lost all the powers and all the opportunities for relationship that the mountain presents. And so, not that colonization is, represents something evil in itself, but that something is lost, something is cut out. And I think we're in such a time now that what has been cut out is probably what we need to address the flattening.
Yes. Yes. So we should search for the cut or the crack, because that's the right path, in fact.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
The right, just like we discussed on our meandering, walk around these gardens, that in order to find your way, you must become lost.
Yeah.
Sometimes knowing where you're going is actually the problem.
Yes. Yeah. And you said it is connected to the idea of rationality.
Yeah.
Do you think that this rationality that the colonial power brought with it is somewhat maybe restricting or somewhat narrowing the range of rationality itself?
Indeed. You probably know the story of Procrustes.
Yes, of course.
The Procrustean bed is a technology.
Yes.
And of course, for those who may not be privy to this story, the robber would take people into his house and would force them on his bed, or give them a bed, really. There's no compulsion there. But once you're on the bed, he would ensure that you fit the bed. So if you're taller than the bed, he would cut your limbs. And if you're shorter than the bed, he'll stretch your limbs to fit the measurement of the bed. I think of this imperial rationality as a Procrustean machine.
Yeah.
What it wants to do is to enforce a rigid identity, is to stabilize the world, to flatten it, to recreate it so that the individual thrives. That rationality is creative. It has allowed us to go to the moon. It has allowed us to build cars and vehicles of great sophistication, but it has lost other kinds of sophistication. And that is how one might say that there are multiple rationalities. And it's not that one is irrational. As you said brilliantly, one is irrational because the other is dominant.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. And also, well, you said that because of that rationality, we can go to the moon, but of course the question remains: why should we go to
Why
the
should
moon? What's
Why should
so
we go to
good?
the moon?
What have you lost
It's the
to
moon.
the
It's the
moon? Yeah,
moon. It's the
it's
moon.
much more beautiful if it is in the sky.
Indeed. Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. Indeed.
Yeah, and you also mentioned this trickster that is connected to different rationality. How would you characterize this Yoruban trickster figure?
I think the very attempt to characterize the trickster moves us into trouble very quickly, because once you define issue, that's the name of this trickster,
That's true, yeah.
spills away from the definition. If you say issue is this, issue becomes 2. If you say, oh, issue is now 2, it becomes 350, right? Issue is too promiscuous to fit into identity. But some of the ways that the Yoruba people describe issue are shapeshifter,
Yes.
shapeshifter, and most importantly, very critically, the holder of Ashe. Now, Ashe is the fluid emergence of everything, how things come to be, how things work. Like, we're having this glass of lemonade. That I'm able to taste this lemonade is Ashe, right?
I see.
That we are wearing shirts and we're feeling some warmth right now is Ashe. When things stop working, that's the loss of agent. You can think of it as agency. Like
Yeah.
the agency of everything is Ashe. Now, this trickster holds Ashe, but he doesn't just hold it anywhere. He holds it at a crossroads.
At the crossroads.
At the crossroads.
Yeah.
So Eshu, the trickster, lives at the crossroads where everything becomes something else. Very
I see.
fascinating to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Like your trickster, the tricksters
Yeah,
you spoke about.
our trickster, well, basically, he spent much of his time already in the period when before creation, when the stones were soft, and so he left many marks on the stones in Estonia. And of course, as he didn't like rigid places, for example, like the spires of the churches, then he tried to bring them down, but well, you know, the trickster always fails in something, and he's very wise, but very smart, but also very clumsy and dumb at the same time. That's this aspect of
duplicity,
fluidity
yes,
and
yes, yes.
duplicity, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the stone fell to the farmyard or somewhere to the edge of the forest, and then people started to come to the stone, and they saw the marks on the stone, and sometimes there was some water in the hollows, and this water was sometimes sacred and had the healing power, and you could also bring offerings to the stones. So, well, in South Estonia, for example, in Meeksi, in Seto, very southeast, there is a hill where the church has been built, and right under the hill is the so-called Jaanikivi, the sacred stone.
Jaanikivi.
Jaanikivi, yes.
Okay.
And so they used to come to the church in Sundays, and then after that they came down and brought offerings to the stone, and also the priest joined them, and you see, it was like sort of a cosmic Christianity that Mircea Eliade has told about. This was possible. It was possible to somehow unite the opposites. And of course, this what you said about the curves. This is also very South Estonian, because the relief of that part of the country is very hilly, and very lots of curved lines, and so there is a story that I mentioned to you about.
Please tell it again.
About the creation of the earth, when the grandfather created it all flat, and then after that he was exhausted. They went to the sauna with the trickster, and the trickster said that wait here for a little bit. After a moment, I will come back and bring some more water. But then he went out and took the instruments of creation that the grandfather had left there, and very swiftly created all kinds of hills and valleys and lakes and rivers. So when the grandfather came out, at first he was quite shocked, but after that he said, well, okay, maybe it's good for something. And so that's why this southeastern part of Estonia has so many hills and valleys. Of course, the grandfather was shocked because he said that you created so many wet things, but at the same time, wetness and watery places are very important for life to grow. You cannot continue life without water. So this idea of fluidity, it's basically also connected to wetness and everything that somehow that is refreshing and restoring.
Yes.
So without water and without wetness, you cannot continue living, and but at the same time it also really means fluidity.
Yes.
And also on the symbolical level, you need the fluidity, otherwise you get stuck into some kind of magic circle that we also were talking about.
Let's talk about that then.
You said that you have been engaged with this idea of being stuck.
Yes.
And repetition.
Yes.
And some kind of you mentioned the death spiral.
Yes.
What is it?
So there's an entomological phenomenon involving ants. I cannot describe it as an entomologist would, but I know that it involves some break away from the major colony, the colony. And I think it mostly involves army ants who are blind.
Yes.
And the only way they navigate is by depending on the pheromonic secretion of the ant in front. So there's no way to go except to depend. It's very militaristic that's why they're called army ants. And so they have to trace each other. Some accident happens sometimes, I guess, that leads to an unfortunate event, which is called the death spiral or ant milling.
Yes.
Ant milling. And what happens is that they go around in circles. They just keep going around in circles that could fit on your table, or circles as wide as a football stadium, right? And they keep on going, and they could go for hours on end until they die in that circle, exhausted with the cyclicity of it. And I think that's a beautiful metaphor. I think it was in the Bible that this phrase is available: go to the ant, thou sluggard, and learn its ways. I think, our time of civilizational trouble is inviting us to learn from that. In a sense, it's a fitting figure for our own stuckness. We're going around in circles. We believe we're making progress, because modernity infuses us with or arouses the sense that we are doing something that's better than the previous. But in a sense, we're just repeating that same. So I call it anthro-milling instead of ant-milling, but anthro-milling. We're going like the anthropos, the Anthropocene.
Yeah, okay.
My trickster play on
Yeah,
words.
you can call it
A
like
stuckness. Yes, yes.
that. Yeah, but Bayo, what do you think? What could we do to
Break.
to break the circle? Yeah, is there something that could be just imagined, some kind of an exit?
How do we break away from the rationality of the circle? How do we address a nature that is not producing, or that is producing the very same dynamics that it's trying to exit from? It's saturated. It's no longer doing anything else. How do we exit from that? I think we can also learn from the ant. And this is fascinating. I'm also intrigued by the phenomenon of fungal infections.
Yes.
With you know the story of Cordyceps unilateralis,
No.
or Cordyceps unilateralis. It's this fungi that affects the ant. It sporulates,
Yeah.
and the spores enter into the ant or the insect,
Yes.
and it takes over the ant's body, over its nervous system, everything except the brain. So it becomes a zombie ant, I think they call it. And somehow this leads the ant to break from whatever its spiral it's in, and it breaks away and gets lost. Of course, the story continues. It goes somewhere, it climbs a leaf, and it dies, and it becomes a fungal station, and it continues that cycle of sporulation. But the break happens because of infection.
Exactly. So we need the right infection. Yeah.
Yes, what do you think about that? What does that evoke for you? The idea of infection being the break from our rationality.
Yeah, that's I think it cannot be otherwise, because the idea of health is always connected to some kind of stability.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, health in reality is never stable.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody can stay alive being constantly the same.
Mm-hmm.
But it's on the other way around. You stay alive in a state of imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
So everything
Imbalance.
that is alive is constantly in a state of some kind of imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, then even diseases are good, because they are part of life.
Yes.
They are also a certain kind of imbalance, and the only problem might be that if the imbalance continues to grow
Mm-hmm.
only into a certain direction, then finally you will lost the imbalance
Mm-hmm.
and become stable, and basically that means death.
Mm-hmm.
So of course death is not the end,
Mm-hmm.
but it's then the next cycle will begin.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
if you want to continue with having a certain body and a certain idea of this cosmic harmony and everything, then you'll have to constantly waver, and this wavering, basically it's like fluidity.
Mm.
It's all the time
Mm.
you are going back and forth, and here and there, and so in this state of instability? Well, I think it was it Gilles Deleuze or Brian Massumi who said, I think it was Massumi who said that basically walking is is falling, that
With
constantly.
style.
Yeah, exactly. You're constantly falling, but
Yeah.
then you stop it
Yes.
and fall towards another direction,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then again towards
Yeah.
another direction and another direction. So it's like that, and
I think
also
it was using that to explain Simondon,
I
met,
see
metastability.
metastability.
Yes, it's if things cool down and
Yeah.
stabilize and crystallize using the idea of a solution, super saturated solution. If it crystallizes and it becomes hardened, then that's also a case for firmness and breakages and
Yeah.
cracks and openings, but also trouble. Like
Yeah. Well, I think he said that walking is the controlled falling. Yeah.
Yes,
But
controlled falling.
I would even prefer not to use the word control, because this is somewhat
Anthropocentric.
it has some kind of there has been some kind of inflation of this idea of control, and of course already in the 60s some kind of irony on that existed. For example, if you have heard this very psychedelic song by Pink Floyd, "Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun."
Oh, I haven't heard. I
in
haven't
fact,
heard that one.
that's so funny. It's the idea is totally stupid, but he sings it with a voice that is like incantation, and
Yeah.
it is so suggestive.
Yeah.
And well, the idea of our civilization, the basic idea is to set the controls for the heart of the sun. It's like
And that's not working.
an injunction, yeah, but you can't do it.
You can't do
And
it.
so, in fact, also walking, it is losing control constantly. You lose control, and then you lose it again, and then you lose it again and again, and
I like that.
but that's a different kind of repetition, because repetition is not always
No,
bad.
not always bad. No.
It's often very good,
Yes.
and it's very healthy.
Yes.
But it must be, I think it must be the repetition without the idea of control,
Yes.
so that you can reach some kind of cosmic principle that you really have no power over. You you are somehow empowered by something different that holds you, but at the same time it does not crush you. It simply brings you on, and you can get into the flow, and then it's some kind of interaction. And if you get into this interaction with this cosmic flow, then it's the best way to move.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
But how to reach that principle again?
It's a good question. It's a generative question. I like the idea of walking being losing control. It's like a curated, again, not controlled, but losing, almost like an interaction between us and ground, right?
Yeah.
It's not entirely, like walking is not what humans do. Walking is an entanglement of ground and
Yes.
and body.
Yes.
We couldn't walk in outer space because we have feet, right?
Yeah.
So it's an ecological thing. It has to be, the conditions have to be right for it. And that opens up this space. But first, I think I want to take several steps back and say, the reason why I distinguish between repetition and stockness is because I think we need repetition. We need repetition to build traditions, to become resilient, to
Yeah.
to have any sort of stability.
Yeah.
We would need that. I think stockness starts to happen when problems become deadening. Like, we need problems. Even repetition creates good problems that keep us engaged. You never want to be in a situation where there are no problems.
Yeah.
Absolutely no
That's absurd.
problems.
Yeah.
That's absurd. But stockness creates deadening problems, or problems that are no longer enlivening. They take up space and they are incapacitating, not in a generative way. This is why I feel modernity is in some kind of a bind now. And an infection, I love the way you held the space for health and the fluidity of novelty and exquisiteness and also embodiment. I think of infection as a transversal thing, something outside of the logic of where we are. An infection could be a child teaching us how to play. An infection could be a shaman or a Noidos walking into a UN conference meeting,
Yeah.
and it breaks the spell of that ration, the trance of that logic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in fact, physiologically, we are constantly infected because all kinds of different beings invade our body
Yes.
all the time.
Yes.
And, most of them are welcome, and they come here and enter us, and the others already living inside us, they get a hold of them, and they show them around, and
Like
they
a
make a
hotel.
deal. How can we continue
Yeah.
living together?
Yeah.
So it's some kind of mutualism
Yes.
always present
Yes.
in our bodies, and well,
But
of
then
course,
something happens sometimes, right? Maybe when
Yeah.
the balance of visitors exceeds the number of rooms, and then
yeah,
it spills.
yes,
Something.
that's when we notice it. But
Yes, that's when we
mostly
notice it.
we never notice it
Most
because
of the time we never notice it.
this
Yes.
this constant imbalance itself is what keeps us together
Yes.
and what keeps us healthy.
Yes.
But of course, this idea of constant infection, it needs the idea of mutuality that is somewhat very rare in our time, because also the vision of nature that has been imposed since the 19th century, and that is really very colonizing
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
vision.
Yeah.
It always stresses the idea of fighting, and that somebody always wins and somebody
loses.
always loses, and so this idea of natural selection, it's so emburdened by this idea of the fight for survival, and so this idea of survival that is in fact a very poor idea. It has become somewhat central in our civilization.
Yeah.
And people talk as if survival would be survival of the fittest would be the goal of the whole evolutionary process, but that's nonsense, because survival is just you only need to survive if you are in a very bad situation of crisis. Then of course you need to survive. If you are in a shipwreck, then you need to survive.
Yep.
You need to get to the coast. But if you already are have landed on the
What
coast,
do you do then?
yeah, then you don't need to survive anymore. You need to get into mutual relations with the beings who live on this island or peninsula or whatever, the continent. So it's survival is just a very, very brief period of overcoming
Adversities.
yes, adversities. But after that, what follows is totally different.
Yeah. It's very teleological. It's and I think what you're playing with is the idea. So, what then is the advantage of being fit after survival has taken place? What else is there? And so, almost like we're thinking beyond utopia, in a sense.
Yes.
We're thinking beyond arrival. We're thinking beyond that. That's not the metric by which we are analyzing that, which kind of allows me to shift into what I think of as a non-legible politics.
Yeah.
It's not legible. Like, politics is largely defined by its intelligibility. It's basically me saying, this is what I promise you if you vote for me. Free healthcare.
Yes.
Free this, free that, free. I'm looking for a politics that we don't know how to define. Like, when I speak about openings and breaks, I'm thinking about a process that allows us to sensorially come alive to the world in new ways, in the ways that Deleuze might have talked about when he said, follow desire, when he, with Guattari and schizoanalysis, analysis,
Yeah.
like, follow desire to where it might lead, and then experiment. And we cannot know what will happen next. We don't know what the future looks like, what next year, what tomorrow, what the next 5 minutes will look like. We don't have grandfather's power to control the resources of creation.
Yeah, exactly.
We do it together, right? So sometimes legibility gets in the way. This seems critical in my work, that clarity can often get in the way of transformation.
Yes. Well, I think David Graeber said something in one of his last conversations, like we need a community with a purpose and without definition. So that we don't need an identity to come together and to have mutual relations, and mutual aid and so on. To get somewhere and to achieve something, we don't have to define ourselves, and so we even don't have to fight with anybody. It's sometimes necessary, but that's not the goal of life. In fact, it's not the basic idea of living to just be in a fighting mood all the time. That's stupid. Because it's much better to have good parties sometimes.
A good party.
Yeah.
I'll drink to that.
Okay,
I'll drink to that. Yeah.
And well, it's like this idea of different politics. It reminds me again of a story that I also told to you about those keys of the manor house.
Yes.
This Estonian story, how this trickster called the old pagan. He's always stealing the keys of the store of the manor house, and then people come together and they cannot enter the store, and finally they find a girl who is very brave and says that, well, I can go to the forest and I'll find them. And she goes there to the deep recesses of the forest, and well, the tricksters live there and they greet her, and they are very kind and offer her food and drink and tell her stories and sing her, and finally when she's leaving they give her the keys. And this will happen many times over, so it's a sort of a repetition, but quite a beneficent repetition. But then once the girl is not in such a good mood, and although she is well received, when she's leaving, he gets into some kind of a rancor, and she turns around and says to the trickster that, well, you have always received me so kindly, and it's always a pleasure to be here, and it's such a nice party, but well, there is something that I would like to ask from you. Why do you tricksters always steal the keys of the store? And then the trickster starts laughing. Well, if we wouldn't steal the keys, then nobody would visit us.
We need the duplicity to create something different.
Exactly.
We need that, or we're stuck.
And and we need some kind of a new kind of humor also. I think that would facilitate finding those cracks that you mentioned, that would get us out from this death spiral. Because without humor we cannot experiment. If you start experimenting but you don't have a sense of humor, then you will easily get frustrated, because experimenting means that you always fail. You will constantly fail, like the trickster. And if you cannot stand failures, then you won't reach anywhere, because only if you take it lightly and playfully, this serious playfulness that Timothy Morton was talking about, that would contrast to this neoliberal serious playfulness, then if you have acquired this kind of approach and this playful mood that allows you to get into difficult situations and to approach very serious and difficult problems with a playful mind, then possibilities will open. Otherwise, they won't.
I like that. I like the idea of humor leading to different postures. Like there's something about the storytelling ability or capacity of humor that breaks the seriousness of our anxiety, or the seriousness of the ways that we think about our problems, or we imagine the future, or we imagine solutions to a wicked problem, for instance, like climate chaos.
Yeah.
Like So that already changes the idea of leadership, right? So the leaders that we need today are tricksters and comedians,
Yeah.
rather than, and I'm not dismissing the work that is done in bureaucratic settings. The entrepreneur is needed. We need different kinds of people, different kinds of energies.
Of course. Yeah.
But there's no one pure, the world isn't pure. But the trickster is usually dismissed, pushed out of the room, and then the room says, it's time to get down to business. We need serious thinkers here. So everyone who's joking, please, out of there. We are saying that there's a mistake. There's a crucial error there. What we want to do is to play, and that might seem ironic and even downright offensive and distasteful to people who devote their lives to serious activism or serious calculations. What do we say to that?
Well, I think you cannot say anything because that would get too serious. But you need to tell them stories.
Tell
funny
them stories. Tell
Yeah.
them stories. Yes,
Just to make friends, and then you will start look at things from different angles.
Yes.
And
Yes.
well, because this idea of playing it also cannot be taken
Too seriously.
Yeah, you
course.
must get there. Well, like children do it. They are somewhat arguing, and already this preparation for a play, it's so playful, and sometimes they get even into small fights over some kind of conflict.
Yeah.
But then it is miraculously solved, and then after a while they are playing, and they are so immersed into this game that you just wonder, how is it possible with a moment before they were fighting, and
now
they
they're
were
playing.
the worst enemies, and then after a few minutes they are the best friends again, and everything just flows. So this is possible, and
I believe so.
yeah,
I
it is
believe so.
possible to get into conflict, and even to fight sometimes, and then to get out from it, and to restore, or not even restore, to establish new mutual relations.
Yes.
And it will flow even better.
Yes.
And so it's everything can be accepted, and a certain amor fati in a way. You will love your destiny if you really accept the differences, and even the diseases and infections.
I like that. But I think what we're doing, stitching together, is we are exemplifying what a different rationality might feel like, might look like, might taste like. And I love the care and the humor with which you noted that there isn't, if you're accused of being too playful, the thing to do is not to convince everyone why this is the physics of play. If we start by A, we will end at Z. Then we would have submitted ourselves or entrapped ourselves in that logic, in the very effort to break that logic open.
Yeah.
So it really is an invitation to, I would say this again, as I shared with you, in order to find your way, you must lose your way. Losing one's way is letting go of the handle with which we curate and control walking.
Yeah.
and to actually walk, because we're trapped now.
Yeah, to
Yes.
lose our way to find our way.
Lose our way
Yeah.
to find our way, or find a new way, or
Yeah.
co-produce something we haven't thought of before. It feels like that's the invitation.
Yeah, or even to lose ourselves to find ourselves.
Yes, yes. Lose ourselves to find ourselves. That
Yeah.
feels exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's it.
So maybe I'll end with just a point that feels
Yeah.
powerful to note, about breakings and openings, that we don't know what we are becoming, right? We don't know what will get, or what happens on the other side, so to speak, of the Atlantic Ocean,
Yes.
right? This is another very powerful trope in trickster discourse, the idea of shape-shifting, right? That
Yeah.
in a sense, to travel is to become monster. To think is to change shape, right? You don't think by standing still.
Yeah.
Good thinking of any kind really is about navigating and moving and entering into new kinds of relationships with the world. Of course, modernity is the presumption that we are stable and we are stable subjects. And so it encourages us to sit and think, to think deeper by using the camera to gain focus, to gain clarity. It kind of immures us from the cartography of thinking.
Yeah.
And so we keep on producing images that are not alive. Images of the future, images of a solution that are just repetitions of the.
Yeah.
So I guess where we've been meandering around, or what we've been doing together, is touching also upon how we are becoming different. And I don't want to frame it as evolutionary, macro or micro evolutionary. Evolution is too
Yeah.
teleologic, you know,
Yes.
for me. It is diasporic in some way, but it is not necessarily teleological. We're becoming
Surely,
different.
yeah.
Yes.
Of
Yes.
course.
Yes.
Yeah, well, what you said about this traveling, it's like something that these Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi once said, just ride on things and let your mind wander freely. And it's not so important what will be the result,
Yes.
because if you do it, then you will get the result anyway.
Like we did here
Yeah.
in our conversation.
Exactly, yeah.
It's been nice talking with you, brother.
It's been very
Thank
nice
you
talking
very
to you,
much.
Bayo.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Lovely.
Biotopia podcast for all living creatures and earth dwellers.